So we resume our discussion on measurable sets and measure, and just recall that we had already proved that the class of measurable sets in the real line, they satisfy a lot of good properties, namely they are closed under taking countable unions, they're taking countable intersection, and also taking complements. And we saw a lot of examples which of sets which belong to this class. For example, open sets, closed sets, and anything which is made out of these things by taking these elementary operations, isn't it? So we are going to now talk about the additivity property, and in fact we are going to talk about the countably additive property for the measure. So that means that we are going to talk about this property on the class of measurable sets. Correct? We already saw that for all the sets, the outer measure need not satisfy the additivity property, but now this collection which we have chosen and we are calling it measurable sets, on this collection the outer measure, which is actually the measure, then satisfies this property. Okay, so we begin basically discussing about this property today. And in fact today, I have connected my iPad, so I will be able to write also when I talk. Okay, so what we need a sequence of measurable sets. Okay, so this is the notation I have been using for the collection of measurable sets, so you keep this in mind. And we have a sequence ej. These guys are mutually disjoint. Okay, that means that ej, and if I take some ek and take their intersection, that is going to be an empty set. Okay, so then if I look at the union, generally this union, we will always refer as E. Okay, so the measure of the union, I am able to write M here for the union, because I know that if EJs are measurable, then their union is also measurable. Okay, so these are like small details which you should keep in mind. So M of the union is basically exactly the sum of measures of each EJ. Okay, now you need to notice here a couple of things, that here, even though I'm writing equality here, but I'm not ruling out the fact that these numbers can also be infinite. Okay, here summation, this is an infinite sum, so this is possibly also infinity, but we really don't care about it. If the right hand side is infinity, the left hand side is also going to be infinity. Okay, in that sense these things are equal. Okay, so before we get into the proof, just you have to recall that what are the tools that we have already managed to get, and what are the things out of that toolbox we can use to prove this. Okay, so we are chasing the additivity property, and we know that in general it doesn't hold for the outer measure, but we had seen that the property holds if I am able to manufacture a gap between sets, and then additivity property can be used for outer measure. Okay, because M is nothing but the outer measure, correct? So we will have to make use of the properties of the outer measure. So this is one of the property which is sort of used. But how do we do this? So uh, this is something which we have to uh, think over, and then see that how do we use the definition of measure or outer measure, so that we can use for example this property. Like if two sets are there, like for example if two sets are compact and they are disjoint, then I know that the measure of their union is precisely the sum of the measures. Correct? So this is what we are going to do, and I'm going to give you an exercise. This is simple one. It doesn't use the one which I am just told you. Rather, it just uses that countable, the fact that if I have uh, a sequence of sets in M, then their union is also in the same collection. Okay, so first you need to do this exercise. Okay, so namely this exercise tells us that in order to prove this general statement, it is actually enough to prove this statement with an extra assumption on this collection, so namely this bounded sets. Okay, so in addition to this hypothesis that they are mutually disjoint, if I also assume that these guys are bounded and prove this theorem, then from there we can deduce the general result. Okay, so basically I'm going to give you a proof with this extra assumption, and then you think about it, and this is an exercise to complete the proof. Okay, and how do we do it? Once I have it for bounded disjoint measurable functions, measurable sets, then what you have to do is you take a sequence, an arbitrary sequence of mutually disjoint sets in M, and then try to reduce the job to these bounded measurable sets which are also disjoint. Okay, how do you do this? Because any set you take in R, you can try to decompose into countably many bounded disjoint sets. Okay, so that is what you need to basically make use of. Okay, so you just draw some picture and then you will be able to understand how to do it. Okay, but let us see with this extra assumption. Again, I mean, there are many ways to prove this. What I am going to sort of use is the fact which we have already proved for the outer measure, and this extra assumption I am going to make use of. So EJs are measurable, okay, and they are bounded. So this fact will actually tell you that if I look at measure of each EJ, this is going to be finite. Okay, so why is this finite? You need to think over it. Okay, so I am saying that if you have a measurable set which is bounded, then the measure is always finite. Okay, once I have this finite measure, then I'm going to use one of the properties which we had obtained, that you can approximate this set from inside in such a way that if I take an epsilon positive, okay, if I take an epsilon positive here, then I can choose a closed set which we are calling as Fj, because this is going to correspond to Ej, such that the measure of the difference, okay, now again you see I am writing here M because Ej is measurable, Fj is closed, so that is also measurable, and taking complements is also gives is going to give you a measurable set. Okay, so that is why I am able to write here M of Ej minus Fj, and this difference I can make less than epsilon over 2 to the power j. This 2 to the power j in the denominator is, it comes often when we are dealing with sequences, and you know the reason, because we need to finally sum over j. Okay, so in order to make that everything is small, we put epsilon, and then in the denominator we put 2 to the power j, so that when we sum over the contribution from each j just sums up to like a fixed constant. Okay, so this is something which we are now quite comfortable using this argument. Okay, but once I have this, notice a few things, that these Fjs being closed and subsets of bounded sets, because EJs are bounded, so they are closed and bounded and hence compact. Okay, and since the original collection EJs, they are disjoint and Fjs are sitting further inside them, so these guys are also mutually disjoint. Okay, and we know that if I have mutually disjoint compact sets, they will satisfy, the outer measure will satisfy the additivity property. Okay, so if I choose any infinite number of them, which I am calling 1 to n, and take the measure of the union, this is going to be the sum of the measures exactly equal. So this is the additivity property, correct? So this is additivity for disjoint compact. Okay, so this is something we make use of. Now, I mean, one can easily complete the proof. Okay, so what we need again, I mean, this is also like always we tell that showing that the measure of union is less than or equal to this is already done by the subadditivity. So all you need to prove is basically, in order to show that this is equality, you need to prove that measure of union is bigger than equal to. So this is the question all the time, correct? So that is what we are going to do. So now just write it down, okay, that this is what we want to prove, and you see that union, the total union is always bigger than equal to, so M of this union ENs is always going to be, so let me just write it here. What you can do is in this step you can insert one more step, that this is bigger than equal to measure of, because this is a smaller set, correct? And just using the monotone property. Okay, and then measure of union of Fn is exactly the sum of measures. Okay, now here I have written that this is going to be bigger than equal to this. Okay, how? Basically this is again small argument using the choice of fj's, which is here. And so just note that, okay, so why is this? I'll write it here. Note that this en rather, or ej, this is nothing but en minus fn union fn, isn't it? So if I take the measure, at least I can use the subadditivity property. So I will not write everything again and again, but subadditivity property will tell me this. Okay, so now you notice here that the difference has come, okay, which is further less than or equal to m of fn plus epsilon, because this is how we chose. Okay, now all you need to do is just basically, that measure of fn is bigger than equal to measure of en minus this number. Okay, so that is what you just have to, you need to plug in over there. Okay, so this is the explanation which you can, okay. And once you get this, now you see this epsilon here which you have chosen here, it doesn't really depend on n, that on the finite collection that we started with. We started with an epsilon, and this n is like, you can take any number as you want. So by taking the, this is like finite sum, by taking the limit also, the same inequality is going to be satisfied, and hence we get this is less than equal to the measure of union plus an extra epsilon, but epsilon is arbitrary here, so we can allow it to go to 0, and we get the additivity property. Okay, so this is like one of the most important property for the measure to satisfy, and this is going to allow us to take limits, and I mean, when we study functions, this is going to be used very frequently. Okay, and it gives some important results. Okay, all right, so far basically what we have managed to do, we have sort of understood like how this countably infinite operations, okay, which are unions, intersections, and then this property of additivity, how do they work for the measure. Now in we are going to make use of this to straight away give two small results, which will sort of give you the notion of limits for monotone sequences. So when I say monotone sequences of subsets, that means in the sense of containment, because on sets you can say that A is contained in B, and we can somehow say that B is larger than A. So if I have a sequence in this fashion, then we can associate this notion of limit and see that how does the measure behaves, okay, with respect to that. So we will consider two situations. So look at I mean, this definition can be given for any sets. They need not be measurable right now, because we are just saying that a sequence of sets. So you look at subsets of R which are nested, okay, upward. That means Ej is contained in Ej plus 1 for all j's. So how, I mean, you have, let's say this is your E1, and then E2 is going to be something like here, and then En something like here. Okay, so this is how you are increasing. Okay, but this is I'm drawing in the plane, you can draw on the line also. Okay, so we say that these guys form an increasing sequence, and we write it like this, that Ej converges to Ej in an increasing manner. So that is by this arrow up, and this E is nothing but the union, correct? This is where they basically converge. Okay, and similarly you can define a decreasing sequence. That means the Ej is going to contain the next one, and the limit here is going to be the intersection, correct, because it's decreasing. And in this case we write that Ej with a downward arrow converges to E. Okay, so these are the two particular collections of subsets. We are going to sometimes we will need them, and we will simply write this notation, that Ej decreases to E, which automatically means that E is nothing but the intersection. And similarly when I write Ej increasing to E, that means E is the union, and the sequence is like nested. Okay, it's increasing sequence. All right, and then the result which you can prove, that this, if I have an increasing sequence, Okay, now I need to talk about measurable sets. Okay, because if I want to associate measure to sets, then I need to start considering sets from the collection of measurable sets. Okay, so if EJ is a sequence of measurable sets which increases to E, now you see in this case E is the union, and we know that union is always measurable if all the EJs are measurable, isn't it? So I will be able to write M of E, and this M of E is actually given by just the limit of M of EJ. Okay, again here things can be infinite. Okay, so that part is always in measure theory when we talk about, I mean, the equalities which we write, we will always consider infinity equal to infinity, that situation. Okay, and when they are decreasing, then also we can say that M of E is the limit of M of EJ's, but here you need this extra assumption that M of EJ for some J should be finite. If M of EJ is not finite for any J, then this property is not guaranteed. That is what I have written over here, that if we do not assume this condition, then the result may not hold of this part 2. Okay, so we cannot really drop this condition if we want this general result. Okay, all right, so the proof of this part is actually easy. It just uses this additivity property which we have just proved for countable collection, but all you need to think of here, let us say the first one, we want to compute M of E. And what is M of E? M of E is M of the union. Okay, but the only trouble here is that EJs are not disjoint. Okay, so somehow what we will do is we will create a new sequence which is disjoint, and its union is just the same as the union of EJs. Okay, and how are we going to do it? This is, I mean, just look at the picture. So these guys are sitting in in the next one. So if I look at E1 and then I am looking E1 union E2, it's enough to look at E1 and then the part which has been increased, correct? Then also I will get the E1 union E2. And what is this part? This part is nothing but E2 minus E1. Similarly, next, when we go to next, E1 union E2 union E3 is nothing but E1, and then this part which we have just put E2 minus E1, and then the part which we have increased again. So this is the part E3 minus E2. Okay, so now this tells us the recipe that how to cook up, or how to get these new sets. Okay, so I give them a name. I call the G1 to be E1, and then you write G2 as the difference of E2 minus E1, and then G3 E3 minus E2, and so on. And in general you can define GJ EJ minus the previous one. Okay, and this you need to do it from J equal to 2 onwards, isn't it? So you see this process, because we are taking this the complements, and all these EJs are measurable, so all the GJs are also measurable. And in this process we are not losing anything, in the sense that the union is going to be same. Okay, so E is all the union of EJ, but it is also union of GJs. But an extra feature we have obtained here, that the GJs in this process which we have obtained, by their definition they are disjoint. Okay, so we have got a new collection of disjoint measurable sets, and we just apply the additivity property. So the first, this is just the additivity property, that M of union is nothing but sum of measure of each set. Okay, now somehow from here we need to pass to the original collection. Okay, so for this we just write down that what is the meaning of this infinite sum. This infinite sum is nothing but the limit of the partial sums. Okay, so partial sums here as 1 to capital N. Now just look at this M of Gn or M of Gj. We can write it down like this. Okay, because this part summation j equal to 1 to n M of Gj's. Now Gj's are disjoint, isn't it? So I am using the additivity once again here and putting it as M of union of j equal to 1 to n Gj. Now look at the picture. So this was your G1, and then this part was your G2, and then this part was your G3. So if I put G1, G2 and G3, what I'm going to get? I'm going to get just E3, correct? And similarly, if I go for G1 union G2 union G3 union G4 and all the way to up to some Gn, then all I'm going to get is just En. So that is what I have basically written it over here, that this the Gj's up to n, they basically sum up to m of En, okay? And this is what you wanted to prove. So this is very easy, just follows from the countably additive property for the measure, okay? Now for the second part, we do the same thing, okay? So here the sequence is other way around, it is decreasing. So in order to form a disjoint collection, we need to subtract the next one. So we do that, okay? We define the Gj's here. Ek, sorry, this should have been K, so not J. Okay, so Gk you define as Ek minus the next one. Okay, so here you see the E1 is the largest set, isn't it? And somewhere here I have also said that it is actually, you know, we can assume that m of E1 is finite, because in the assumption here of the statement that we have m of Ej is finite for some j. Okay, so instead of j for some fixed j, we can always assume that j is 1, because you know, when we are talking about limits of sequences, we can always drop first finitely many terms from that sequence. Okay, so that is the reason we can always you know, wherever the m of Ej becomes finite, we start from there and call that 1. Okay, so that is why I have written here that we can safely assume, or without loss of generality, we can assume that m of E1 is finite. Okay, all right. Now you see for this decreasing sequence, the first set is the largest one. Okay, and then how these GKs are being obtained, that you know, you are removing the next one and then next one. So this E1 is going to be the union of these guys, but you know, the intersection of these guys can be left out, so we need to put that also add. Okay, because we are removing them, so these Gj's are not going to count for the intersection, because it may happen that all the EKs, they have something in common, so that we have to add in order to get the largest set. Okay, so this E1 can be written as E union and then another union of Gj's. Okay, and by choice, you know that these Gj's are disjoint, and since E is nothing but the intersection of all these guys, so if I put this also into this collection, this is a countable collection, adding one another set to this collection remains a countable collection. So this E along with this Gj's, what we have a countable collection of mutually disjoint measurable sets. Okay, so we just apply the additivity property, so the m of E, and then here we apply the previous property. Okay, that m of this union is summation of m Gj's. Okay, but then we write down the definition of the infinite sum as the limit of the partial sums. Okay, and all you need to just do is now look at how this m of Gj behaves in terms of m of Ej's. Okay, and this follows from the definition that Ek can be written as Gk union Ek plus 1 in a disjoint manner. Okay, so you just use that and express your m of Gk in terms of m of Ej minus m of Ej plus 1. Okay, now you see, when j equal to 1, I have m E1 minus m E2 with a negative sign. Is this m E2 is coming, but in the next step what will happen, there will be m E2 with a positive sign. So this is like a telescopic sum. Okay, so all you are going to get here, the first term and the last term. So the first term is m E1 and the last term here is this should be plus 1, correct, because Ej plus 1. So this is not En, rather En plus 1. Okay, now you see this is independent of n, so this comes out of the limit, and what you have with a negative sign is the limit. Now you know that limit of limit n going to infinity an is same as limit n going to infinity an plus 1, correct? So that is what I have used over here. And what you had on the left hand side, you see this is here, this was m of E1. Now from here you can conclude that m of E is equal to provided that this number which is on both sides, this is finite, correct? If this number is not finite, then we cannot deduce that m of e is equal to limit of m of ens, correct? So that is the use of this assumption that m of e1 is finite. Okay, now so this is actually just countably additive property that you had proved. That is what gives us these two important properties for the sequence of measurable sets which are increasing or decreasing. Okay, but in this case we had this extra assumption, so you need to keep this in mind, that if you want to apply this need not be true all the time. So you need to assume that one of the set EJ has a finite measure. Okay, now I leave it to you to think of some example of a sequence which is decreasing, but then the final result doesn't hold. That means you need to consider sets, measurable sets EJ whose measure is infinite for each j, and see that for that also need to make sure that m of intersection doesn't happen to be limit of m of ej's. Okay, so that I leave it to you. Think of some suitable example for that. All right, so there are lots of exercises which I am giving you here. Okay, so these exercises you should think over, try to prove them, and discuss with me whenever you want to. Okay, and then I have listed down few more exercises with these properties which we have already proved. You can use them and prove these exercises. So for example, you remember we defined the measurable sets using open sets, and then we also proved a property that you can sort of approximate a given measurable set from inside by closed sets. Okay, so this is in the same lines, that if I assume that E is measurable with finite measure, then this first property says that you can approximate this actually by compact sets. Okay, so this is much more better, not just closed set but compact. You can make the set K to be compact. So if you take an epsilon positive, you can choose a K sitting inside E which is compact, such that the measure of the difference E minus K is very small. Okay, and not only that, you can even make it better, that this compact set you can choose of this form, that this is actually union of closed intervals. Okay, because compact set I need to take closed intervals. Okay, so in such a way that I am not saying here that the capital F is contained inside E. I mean, there can be some overlap here and there because I am taking intervals, but what you can always make sure that the measure of the symmetric difference. Okay, so there can be a part which is E minus F and F minus E, that is the meaning of symmetric difference. Okay, so this F need not be completely inside E, but the part which goes outside, it's going to be very small. Okay, so this can be, so this is why are such things important, because when we want to deal with general sets in analysis or anything, like you want to prove results for general sets, but what are the tools you have? Like you can work with open sets, you can work with closed sets, and then you can work with compact sets, and you can work with intervals, because these are like easy to work with. So certain results which you want to prove for general sets, you try to prove them for these kind of sets which are easier to work with, and then sort of from there you manage to somehow get the result for the general set, and these are the properties which will help in doing that. Okay, so always from the known things you want to construct something new. Okay, so this is basically that exercise. Okay, and then the third exercise says that if your E is measurable, then the translate of E is also measurable, and once that happen, you already know that translate of a set has got the same outer measure, and hence this measure will be invariant under translation, isn't it? And the next exercise is like you look at the Cantor set. You know what is the Cantor set? Cantor is that 1/3 set you take and show that it is measurable. Okay, how will you show that it is measurable? You have all these properties that that what kind of sets are measurable and what operations you can perform on them. So if you can think of your Cantor set in terms of some known sets which are measurable, and some operations which under which the collection M is closed, isn't it? And once you do that, then you can also try to see then what is the measure of this Cantor set. Okay, so these are small exercises. And one more exercise, okay, so first of all, this is any given set, and then you look at un. So what is un? Un is basically all these points which are at most distance 1 upon n from the set E. Okay, so you think of it, it's, so you have, let's say this is your set E. So from here you can go like 1 upon n distance in each direction. Okay, so this is like 1 upon n. So you are considering these points. So naturally E is always going to be there because every point in E will be a distance 0 from E, correct? So basically this is some sort of a neighborhood of this set E, isn't it? And the first thing is like you show that this each of these EUN is an open set. Okay, once it is an open set, then you know it is measurable. And if in addition I assume that my set E that I started with, it is a compact set, then you can actually get that the measure of E is actually the limit of measure of these colors, because you see as n is increasing, this 1 upon n is becoming smaller and smaller. So this is going to be a sequence which is, so you need to ask what is the relation between un and un plus 1. Okay, so if something is less than 1 upon n plus 1, because 1 upon n plus 1 is less than 1 upon n, okay, so that is always going to be in un. Okay, so that is how you can see that whether the sequence un is increasing or decreasing, and just look into it and try to see that m of p you can write down in terms of measure of the neighborhoods. Okay, and finally you need to see that we have defined measurable set, and the definition is given in terms of some property that if this holds, then we say that this given set is measurable, correct? So this is naturally going to tell you that there will be sets which are not measurable, because for two reasons you can always think. We have already proved that measurable sets, they satisfy this countably additive property, correct? Whereas the outer measure did not satisfy this. Okay, so the collection is certainly not the whole collection of subsets in the class M. Okay, so then you need to show that in a sort of an existential way, that there exists a set N which is not measurable. Okay, that means I cannot find this set using that definition, that approximation by open sets and so on. Okay, so you need to think about it, and the proof I have actually already given when I showed that the additivity doesn't hold. If you look into that proof, you will see that there is a set constructed over there which is not measurable, because if that was measurable, then countably additive property will be satisfied, and hence you will get a contradiction. Okay, so this is what I wanted to tell you today, and this is I end here today. And now you guys should look at all these problems which we have been discussing, so that you get a better hold on these topics. Okay, so see you then.